Stories of addiction, depression, self-harm, heartache, war, fear, and hopelessness echoed in his mind. Every night, a fan would share a different story. Although Jake was the well-recognized frontman of August Burns Red, he was at a loss for how to help. He wasn't a mental health specialist, and he screamed into a mic for a living. Not exactly the picture of expertise his fans needed. Deep in thought and prayer, all Jake knew was that something had to change. Heart Support is about building a place where people can come together as they are while exploring healing. They provide relevant resources to an increasingly digital generation, teaching them to give back and help others grow stronger together. Every year, they help men and women brave their wounds, find purpose, and discover healing. Their goal is to create a legacy, a term we often use, of life transformation, freeing them from suicide, addiction, abuse, and mental health issues, while empowering them with the realization they are loved unconditionally and supported by a community that believes in them. You know, it's long been our goal at the Veterans Project to not just create awareness through storytelling, but to generate an actionable process where our community gets the much-needed mental health resources it needs to find healing. We hear that number of 22 a day all the time, but what are we doing to put an end to that? Through our relationship with Heart Support, we believe that restoration can be just around the corner. Join us on twitch.tv/Heart Support on November 11th, Veterans Day, for the beginning of our new partnership and an introduction to our plan of action. To learn more and find out how you can help, send us an email at info@heartsupport.com. There is nothing outside of yourself that can ever enable you to get better, stronger, richer, quicker, or smarter. Everything is within. Everything exists. Seek nothing outside of yourself. Miyamoto Musashi, The Book of Five Rings. For those of you who have been following the project for a while, you'll definitely remember our next guest, a titan of the tactical industry who dedicated his life to the world of special operations. Tu Lam's path brought him out of the terroristic throes of a communist state in 1976 Vietnam, and into a land he believed so strongly in that he spent 23 years as its protector. His escape so narrow that his mother almost died defending him. Whatever the case, Lam found himself on American shores, the adopted son of a Green Beret who taught him the way he would pursue for those 23 years. Navigation by the stars in the backwoods of North Carolina, proper field craft, language training, and combatives, all preparing him at an early age for the odyssey of the warrior. Still, after a well-deserved retirement from Special Forces, Tu was at an impasse, those darkest years of war weighing on his soul like an iron anchor. The decades of combat had finally caught up with him, and so began the search for peace, once again found through service to the community that he'd once fought alongside. Lam had to dig deep inside himself and find spiritual healing in order to ascend from the chaotic lifestyle that had once been the norm for him. So we talked about that. How do you become the warrior tending the garden, prepared for chaos, while remaining serene within? Here he is with an education on finding that life of serenity, the one and only Tu Lam.
The Veterans Project is a comprehensive essay capturing the legacies of our warfighters, caregivers, and civilians who have stepped forward in defense of our patriotic principles in an effort to capture their stories and to never forget the staggering sacrifices of our nation's finest. This is the Veterans Project Podcast, where our legacies are the mission. Here's your host, Tim Kay.
Welcome to the Veterans Project Podcast. My name is Tim Kay, your host as always. With me today, we've got a good friend of mine here, Tu Lam, Ronin Tactics, an incredible man, Green Beret, who served this nation for 23 years, right?
Yes.
Tu, welcome to the project. Thanks for coming on, man.
Arigato gozaimasu. Thank you for having me on.
It's wonderful to have you here. So, Tu, as we usually do with these podcasts, we kind of go back through time, talk a little bit about where you came from. We want to discuss reintegration, obviously, too, as a big part of this, because it's so important to the veteran world, the veteran sphere, this community that we're in. But first, would you take us back through your childhood and kind of where you came from and what took you down the path of the Green Beret?
Yeah, absolutely. So my life started off in war. I was born in the Vietnam War. I was born during the failing states of South Vietnam. I was born in the city of Saigon. Actually, in the morning of my birth, the North Vietnamese surrounded the city of Saigon, and they were hitting us with artillery fire. My mother shielded my body from the incoming artillery fire the morning of my birth. Let's put back in history,
Okay.
right? So at that time of my birth, the Americans already withdrew from Vietnam. The South Vietnamese, which was on my side, we were on the losing side of the war. The North Vietnamese were coming in with their communist ideologies. On the morning of my birth, about 4 months later, I lost my freedoms. So basically, I lost my freedoms at 4 months. I had no country, I had no freedom. Our people were oppressed. At 2 years old, my mother said that we were pulled out into the streets. My uncles that served alongside the American military, some of them were executed. Other ones were imprisoned in what they call re-education camps, which were torture camps. At 3 years old, we escaped on a wooden fishing boat with hundreds of other fleeing refugees. So during our escape, I wanted to talk about this because there was a lot of surrounding countries. So Thailand, think about all the countries, Malaysia, Indonesia, all these surrounding countries had their pietry that was going on at the time. So you think about all the fleeing refugees out of Vietnam, they have all their belongings on them. And as we were escaping, that was the first obstacle, is the pietry that was going on. The pirates would stop the boats, murder the men, rape and kill the women, and torture the kids and kill the kids. In fact, it was a common practice amongst the fleeing refugees that they would carry poison in their belongings. When the pirates, during the final moments, they would poison their children so that their children would not have to endure the torturous death that awaits them.
Wow.
We crossed that, and we were able to evade the pietry that was going on. And then we went into Malaysia. The Malaysian Coast Guard stopped us at gunpoint. They anchored our boats, drug us back out into the South China Sea, and shot our engine. They left us there to die.
Wow.
And the reason for this is because a lot of the neighboring countries at the time, they did not want to deal with the refugees. They didn't want to deal with the issues of Vietnam. So a lot of these countries would not allow the refugees to go into their countries.
Wow.
So here we were, out stranded out in the middle of the ocean. My mother said that people started fighting amongst each other. People were dying. She said that we were roughly out at sea for around 30 days. We got caught up in a huge storm, and that washed us deeper into the China Sea, where a Russian supply boat was coming out of Vietnam. And they saw a stranded boat, picked us up, and took us into Indonesia, where they docked us in Indonesia, and we lived in the refugee camps for a year and a half.
Wow.
Now these refugee camps is it's not safe, man, because you have all these fleeing refugees. They go in there to these refugee camps. People are murdered for supplies. That's a common practice. I mean, you're living off the land. You're living in poverty in grass huts. My mother was a survivor, man. So what was really cool about her was that she knew, like, the rich refugees, well, they needed money, right? They needed money to pay for food. So they would sell their belongings to the local loan sharks. Now, my mother knew that these loan sharks were giving them maybe 5% of the trade of the value of the jewelry. So she offered to be the middle person, and she would make the dangerous trip through the jungles up north of the island, where the trading was more profitable. These jungles, man, they were areas where people get murdered, people get raped, people disappear in these jungles. And my mother would make this journey up north once a week because she knew the commission would feed us.
Mm.
Growing up, my brothers often spoke of, he would go into the jungles as a young boy, and he would gather firewood. And he often spoke of dead bodies in these jungles.
Wow.
Roughly about a year and a half, we got sponsored by my uncle, who was an American Special Forces Green Beret. He married my aunt. His G base got overran. He was actually stabbed by SKS bayonet and medevaced out back to the States. They thought he was going to die, but he actually lived. And he wrote a basically a sponsorship letter, and he was able to get us over to America. We came over to America. We lived with my uncle for a little bit. My mother eventually got remarried to American Special Forces Green Beret. So at 8 years old, I was running through the backwoods of Fort Bragg, North Carolina, learning land navigation and, learning counter tracking techniques and stuff. And, my stepfather was just trying to be cool. He was just trying to show me what he knew, spending father and son time together. But those trade crafts, the field crafts that he taught me at a young age kind of panned out later on in my career.
That's so valuable.
Absolutely. But you know what was really unique about my childhood was that, I faced racism in the 80s. And let me put you back in history here. The Vietnam War was the most unpopular war in American history. And the reason why is because the Vietnam War allowed journalists, right, to be able to be attached to units and actually go out and tell the story, right? Up until then, the military would censor everything that goes through. So the Vietnam War showed the raw footage of actual combat.
Right.
So very unpopular war. So growing up in Fayetteville, North Carolina, which is, right outside the biggest military base, right, Army base in all of the United States and home special operations.
Yeah.
So growing up around there, you have a diversity of kids, from their parents. And a lot of them, at the time were, they felt the same way their parents did about the Vietnam War and about, the Vietnamese. So I had to deal with a lot of that growing up. But what was unique about my childhood was, my stepfather didn't play those games. He didn't play the victim. We had a strict military upbringing. We would get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, raise the flag. We'll start PT before even going to school.
Wow.
So we had a very regimented lifestyle. Beds are made. We had a uniform code. We had to wear certain slacks and button-down shirts to school. So very, very military. So that's how I was raised. I didn't have very much friends. And the friends that I did have was my father's teammates who were badass Green Berets, So that's where I knew at a young age, that's kind of like where my path was going towards.
Yeah. Those are cool friends to have, by the way.
They are. And these guys were, Sante Raiders, these guys were MacV SOG. They're legends in their own accord during their times. So I was raised up with that history. What really turned me on to the Green Berets was, my mother. We didn't have very much growing up. And my mother would often donate to the local Vietnamese community. Now, when I say that is, these Vietnamese people were refugees just like us. They don't have anything, nothing. Everything was taken away from them during their escape. So these people are barely making it. And growing up around that environment, these people are judged, spit on because of their poverty status and their race. And that's what I grew up to. But my mother would often make the long drive to these communities, and she would donate to them. She would cook to them. And I remember asking my mother one time, I said, Mom, why do you care so much about people that you don't even know?
Right.
And she said this to me, man. She said that, no matter how bad off you are in life, right? If you can, you must help others. There's other people in need. And, that night I reflected on that.
Yeah.
I reflected on that day, and I knew the Green Beret mission. The Green Beret mission was to go in and free those oppressed, because I was oppressed as a child. My family, we escaped Vietnam. So I had this energy in me at a very young age. I just didn't know what it was. And what it was purpose.
That code of De Oppressively Rare built within.
Exactly. And, and I think I owe a lot to my uncle, who was a officer in Special Forces. I owe a lot to my stepfather, who was a Green Beret himself. So I knew a lot of that, and I knew the Green Berets was my ticket back in.
Yeah.
And when I say my ticket back in, it was my ticket to go around the world and free those oppressed.
Yeah.
So I knew that at a young age. So 11 years old, I aimed towards the Special Forces.
That's awesome. And you got there. Not everybody does. Man.
Yeah. Well, what's funny is that, at 18, I I enlisted in the military. And, there was no direct entry into the Special Forces back. There was no Special Forces baby program or anything. The two requirements was you have to be, and it's waiverable. One of them is waiverable. You have to be E5 and you have to either have 5 years in service.
Mm.
Well, being a young paratrooper in the 82nd, I went to Ranger School. And that kind of catapulted me in front of all my other peers, graduating with that. I was able to get promoted to E5 in a year and a half,
Wow.
and that qualified me with a waiver to go into Special Forces. But, at that time, I was assigned to the 18 Airborne Corps amphibious reconnaissance teams. So we were doing a lot of reconnaissance work and the JTF 6 missions down in the border of Mexico and stuff like that. But at 21, I tried out for the Green Berets. Went into the weapons course, went through their long pipeline. In fact, the Green Berets is the longest pipeline even to date when it comes to specialized training.
Right.
So graduate from the Special Forces qualification course, and then I went to language training, and then I went to 1st Special Forces Group, which was in Okinawa, Japan.
How much did your dad, the way he raised you, your stepfather, how much did that really play into, going through the course and making it through? Did his words resonate within as you were going through some of those hard days, or did you just feel like you were meant to be that the whole way?
Oh, no. There's times in we Team Week, which is like Hell Week for SFAS, Special Forces Assessment Selection. So Team Week is the breaker, right? So that's where guys get injured. That's where majority of the guys dropped out. That week made me rethink what I was doing,
Yeah.
right? Because the pain is just unbearable. But I'll tell you this, man. When you asked if my father's words carried me through, absolutely. My father's words, but not just his words, it was the promise I made to myself, at such a young age. I knew that this was my path. Well, at least I knew this was my ticket
Right.
to go back in these countries, for that purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. So a lot of his words helped. A lot of my uncle's words helped. My uncle would often pick me up to take me to Dairy Queen when I was a young little boy. And this is how he spoke. He didn't have a muffle, right? So he would tell me how things are. He goes, "2," as he's driving me to Dairy Queen, I'm only 11. Okay? And he said, "2, some days, you're going to feel sorry for yourself, and you're going to get tired, man, and the pain's going to set in. And you need to ask yourself this. Do you want to be a fucking commando?" And I looked at him, right? And he was like, and as he was driving towards Dairy Queen, he goes, when the days are long, and people say you can't do it, you're going to ask yourself, do you want to be a fucking commando? And what was funny, Tim? It was that during Team Week, when the weight of the rucksacks and the 45-pound poles lashed onto a 3-wheel Jeep as you're pushing it through the foothills of Camp McCall, right? And the pain sets in, people start quitting, I asked myself that. Do I want to be a fucking commando today?
Yeah.
And sorry for that but I needed you to understand the energy that was delivered at that young age, And so his words carried me, man.
Yeah.
Right? So absolutely, I pulled from, in time of pain, I pulled from the strengths of my life.
We all need that uncle who will let it rip every once in a while.
Absolutely. I love him.
That's awesome.
So Special Forces training, went to Okinawa, where I was assigned to a combat search and rescue team at first, where our mission was to recover downed pilots in North Korea. And then 9/11 happened. Right?
Wow.
So 9/11 happened, and being out for Special Forces Group, it was a global war on terror. Our mission was to combat Abu Sayyaf terrorist group in southern Philippines.
What was that feeling like? I don't want to stop you, but what was that feeling like for you when the towers got struck? Do you remember that?
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah.
What was unique about that day is, I was dating my wife at that time.
Oh, wow.
I met her during counterterrorist training in Fort Bragg, and I flew back, and I was stationed in Okinawa, Japan. And I think what was unique was she flew that day to come see me in Japan, And, back then we didn't have cell phones So, man, we went no comms for a while,
Wow.
So that was why I remember that day, because she was actually flying to come see me that day. The great thing about was they canceled all the flights, so she was safe. But I didn't hear from her for a while because there was no cell phone.
That's scary.
That was super scary.
Yeah.
And on top of that was the time difference between Japan and the United States, And it was really surreal when I seen those planes hit our towers. I knew we were going to go to war. There was no doubt about it. I just didn't know where.
Right.
I didn't know where at the time. So we were tasked to go into southern Philippines. At that time in Basilan Island, the Abu Sayyaf terrorist group wanted an independent Muslim nation. So they started targeting Christianity up in the islands of Basilan. So they started killing innocent lives. Just a bad group of guys, man. So our mission was to come in, assist the Filipino government on training a commando force that was going to quickly insert into the jungles and combat Abu Sayyaf. I did a few rotations in the Philippines, but during that time, I knew where the war was, man.
Yeah.
And I had my eyes on where the heavy fighting was, which when I left the Philippines, it was Afghanistan or Iraq.
Right.
And I knew this. So I went to USASOC. I was assigned to USASOC in North Carolina, where our mission was to combat Zarqawi at that time in Iraq. So I spent 7 years in USASOC doing a lot of specialized stuff, being deployed around the world, combating terrorism. I left after 7 years, went to 10th Special Forces Group, where my area operation was concentrated on Libya, the continent, the Horn of Africa. And then after that, man, I hit my 23-year mark. I could tell you, I was lost at that time.
Yeah.
It was a hard time in my life. Any combat veteran can tell you, especially on the teams, you're going at 150 miles an hour to a dead stop.
Yeah.
And once you hit that dead stop, all of the thoughts and emotions that you kind of suppressed throughout the years will hit you.
Yeah.
So it was during that time where I realized that I needed to get out and I needed to find my footing, my place again in life, So I started working on myself.
Yeah.
First.
What do you think that was, that moment? Was there a moment, or was it a collection of moments that got you to where you knew that it was time? It was time to get out and make your own, diverge from that path and start your own.
The passion isn't there anymore. The clarity isn't there anymore. I guess you could say, maybe a little complacency on the things because you've done these ops so many times, so you get kind of complacent. So that kind of clued me in.
Is that scary when you get to that place, when you realize a little complacency sets in and you're starting to, was that tough?
What was scary was that you just don't care about your individual safety anymore. Right? You kind of grow numb.
Almost a little fatalism in a way.
Numb.
Yeah, numb.
It's more of the word. So if you have no emotions towards things, how can you have passion, right? Towards a purpose, right? So I guess you could say I lost it. So as I was in my dark place, I realized that what was my first teachings in life.
Yeah.
See, I started my teachings at 8 years old in the martial arts. Martial arts to me isn't just movements, isn't just a form of close quarters combat, hand to hand. Martial arts, martial means military.
Yeah.
Arts is a dedication of art, is beauty. I realized that the martial arts, my first teachings in life, was my answer back. When you're passionate about something, man, right? History kind of repeats itself. Everything comes full circle. We agree with that?
That's true, yes.
Right?
Very.
Well, in the teachings of, so at 13 years old, I read the Book of Five Rings.
Oh, that's normal reading for a 13-year-old. Why did I have a feeling Tu Lam would be reading that book at 13 years old?
Yeah. So for the viewers that don't know what the Book of Five Rings is, he was Miyamoto Masashi. He was a Ronin, and he was born back in the late 1500s and died in 1645 in a Buddhist cave. Tim, I meditated in that cave 3 years ago.
Wow.
In the closure of the war, for me. But I think what's unique about this is that when the first time at 13 I picked up the Book of Five Rings, I read it. And I closed it. I'm like, I have no idea what this guy is talking about.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But what's weird, man? It was during my darkest moments. After my 23 years is when I dust off the shelf and I picked up the Book of Five Rings. If you look over here in the library, I have 16 copies of the Book of Five Rings.
Not enough. You need 17.
And the reason why is, man, I traveled to 27 countries.
Wow.
Right? So everywhere I saw the Book of Five Rings, and man, in Spanish and Japanese, wherever, Korean, wherever I go, and I see a copy, I make it a point.
And the principle applies no matter where you're at.
Absolutely. So during my darkest years, I picked up the Book of Five Rings. And Minamoto Masashi, he said something that resonated with me at that time, at that moment, right? Because, sometimes I could tell you something or you could read something, it doesn't mean anything to you.
Yeah.
But in your darkest moments, the words have depth.
You come back to that, yeah.
Right? So, as I opened up the book, Miyamoto talked about do not look for strength anywhere else, All your love, all your passion, everything comes from within. Look nowhere else. And what's funny is that, the Green Berets, hard dudes, right? Because we have to be. We have to go through hard training. And it's a very tough mindset. But at that time, man, when I was lost, I was looking for strength everywhere else. Well, I call my father. I'm like, hey, Dad, how did you do it? How did you do it, man? Right? I'll talk to some of my veteran friends that got out. I'm like, man, how did you do it?
Yeah.
How do you find your path when you're going at 150 to 0? And a lot of us, man, I hate to say it, don't make it. Because we can never find our footing again, and I never wanted to be that because that's not what life is about.
Right.
Right? Life is about living life in every breath, the teachings of samurai. So the teachings of samurai was to find strength within. At that time, man, I didn't have it.
Yeah.
I didn't. Yeah, I'm a commander. Obviously, I have that strength, but I didn't have the strength to move past that energy. And I realized that along the way, I kind of lost some attributes that I admired throughout my life. Right? Because when you get so fixated on certain things like, I don't know, surviving. Right? You
kind of important, yeah.
You kind of have to let go of certain energies.
Right.
Like kindness.
You lose parts of yourself within that survivability. You're trying to survive, but you don't realize other attributes are being stripped away.
How can you have kindness when your job is, to do certain things, right?
Right, yeah.
So, man, obviously I had compassion, right? But kindness was definitely one of the things, right? And fulfillment was another one. So I wrote down a list of flaws. Man, I had them. Right? I had them at this point. And no holds bar list of flaws, right? And I wrote them all down, man. And then I started studying it.
Wow.
When I say studying is, if I give you a target, right? If I say, hey, this bad guy's in this country, you're going to study that. You're going to study his behaviors. You're going to study his pattern of life. You're going to study that country. You're going to study the environment. You're going to study the social situation, the infrastructure. You're going to study it.
Right.
So that's what I did. Kindness was one. Like I started studying. Like, oh, okay. So I somehow I cocoon myself in these days, right? Because on the teams, well, man, I tell you, we run in certain circles, right? We can only talk about certain things, and so you're going to run with the people that you can talk about stuff
right,
to, right?
Yeah, totally.
And other people just don't understand, so you do run in certain circles, right? So kindness, like a job, man. I went out and I sort to be kind. I would open up doors to people, and I'm like, "Have a great day," and they're like, "Excuse me." I would go into the store and say, "Thank you so much. I appreciate you."
Yeah.
To, I don't know, a Walmart cashier. Some people would give me, weird looks, but I didn't do it for them, Tim.
Right.
I did it for me.
Yeah.
And after a year of doing that, I became kind, man.
Practice.
Right. I became kind again,
Wow.
and then I realized at that point where I'm like, hey, there's a lot of other stuff that we need to work on here. Fulfillment. What makes you fulfill as a human being in life, man? Right? I'm asking you, what makes you fulfill, man?
Focusing on others, telling their stories.
Okay.
Yeah.
So purpose, right? You
Purpose,
have a
yeah.
purpose.
Mm-hmm.
So I needed to find my purpose again, right?
Yeah.
I needed to find. So
It's hard though, going from a gunfighter and defender of free, a defender of oppressed nations, to getting out of that and then finding that fulfillment is tough because you had such a singular focus. You're doing something very purposeful, and so finding it outside of that is tough, right?
Well, you just have to change the way you view life,
Okay.
right? You have to change the way you view the world, man. Right? So we're both Americans.
Yes.
You love this country, right?
Love it.
So why can't I take my life experience and help others in our country? Why can't I protect communities? Right? Why can't I help our law enforcement and the dynamic situation that they have to face these days, right?
Yeah.
It's a different world, right?
Even more so than when we last talked.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I remember when you came out when I was in Dallas training
Yes.
the law enforcement guys. I could tell you things changed.
Yeah.
Tactics changed, more restraints on our officers.
Mm-hmm.
But with more restraints on our officers, what did that lead to civilians?
Yeah.
Right? Because who's going to protect them now as we tighten down on, what a police officer can do and how he can serve his community.
Right.
Or she can serve her community, right?
Mm-hmm.
So law-abiding citizens, man, they need to protect themselves, right?
Absolutely.
So here I am, right? This samurai. No, here I am, this Green Beret who's training unconventional warfare,
Right.
training strategy, training combat. Well, why can't I take that and make a world a better place? Because I took those skill sets to make a world a better place by freeing the enslaved, right? Stopping modern day genocide. So why can't I take my teachings and just make a better country?
Yeah.
That's the birth of Ronin.
Yeah.
Through the teachings of Miyamoto Musashi's to find my inner strength again. My journey to fix my flaws,
Yeah.
right? And then one of my flaws is, man, I need to connect to the people again, right? Because all these years, I lived in that cocoon life. Well, I disconnected myself from society.
Yeah.
So now it's about reintegrating myself in again and giving others my experience. And maybe through my experience, you can find your way, right? You don't have to be a commando,
Yeah.
right? But maybe, okay, I was talking to a college student the other day. He was a lazy college student.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he was not motivated about anything,
There's no such thing as lazy college students.
That's so true, right? Oh. So I said, man, so I told him about my college.
Yeah.
When I graduated from high school, my mother, I told her I'm joining the military. She was heartbroken, Tim.
Really?
Heartbroken.
That surprises me.
Well, it shouldn't, because she left her country, who was ripped apart by war, right? She is married now to my stepfather, who's a Green Beret, who deployed all through South America and Central America in the 80s,
Yeah.
fighting combat, counter drug missions, right?
Right.
So she kind of had that snapshot, and she wanted a better life for me. She didn't want me to go to war, man. She put me on that boat to escape war, right?
We got out of war. Now you want to go back to it?
That's what she told me. That's what she said.
Wow.
And she was heartbroken. And I love my mother, man. And I made a promise to her that day. I said, Mom, I know that you gave up everything for us. You wanted a better life, better education. And you did. You gave us a better life and education. But this is something I have to do. But I will promise you, I will finish college. And I will have the military pay for it.
Wow.
And I said, so take the money that you save for me and, give it to my brother he was going to medical school at that time. He definitely needed
So you need that money.
he needed that money anyways. But, man, hey, so I was telling this college student, I said, so when I first joined the Army, I was a young paratrooper. And then I went to Ranger training, and then I went to, long range reconnaissance, doing counter drug missions on the border as I was going to school.
Wow.
And I told him, I said, being a Green Beret on the A teams, going to college had its difficulties. We were running with rebel forces, maneuvering through conflict areas, and I was going to college.
Yeah.
But I tell you what, Tim, I took my final exam in Cameroon.
Oh, wow.
Doing counter poaching campaigns. In fact,
I didn't even know that. That's awesome.
I took my final exam on a Cameroon commando camp.
Wow.
And this is the thing, man. I graduated with honors.
Wow.
I graduated honors with a degree in Homeland Security.
Wow.
And I sent that, I sent that picture to my mother. And she cried.
Yeah. How proud were you in that moment?
I was proud because I knew the power of a promise, man. Right? So I was able to give my mother back something that meant so much to her.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that was what made me really proud, was because she gave up so much for her. And I finished college to show my appreciation to her.
Yeah.
Obviously, I needed to get smarter, right? I needed a college degree.
We all do, yeah.
But, man, I truly did it. I would say about 50% of it was for my mother, too.
Wow. And your word was your bond, and you lived up to that bond.
Right.
We would be a better society if that happened more often.
Right. So I think, as a human being, if you are to serve or you're not to serve, if you are an actor, an athlete, or whoever you are, a single mother, a college student struggling in life, whatever, you overcame that struggle.
That's huge.
Right? You broke through. You were able to breach that void and become the person you wanted to be.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
Because I tell you what, man, I faced my struggles, right? And I became the person I wanted to be, a mentor, a teacher to so many these days, right? As an instructor for Ronin. But I tell you, man, to find that, right? To find that, to look at your struggles and go, okay, that hurt.
Yeah.
But this is what I extract from that. And this is who I want to be because of that pain that I felt.
Yeah.
Right? Because, man, I can tell you to change, but you're not going to change until you scarred yourself.
Yeah.
In emotions.
Wow.
And at that point in my life, man, I needed that change. And I feel like we need to say that to the veterans.
Yeah.
Right? Because, gosh, man, our combat veterans, they've been through it, especially, in the last 18 years, they've been through it.
Yeah.
And to give them an answer, right? To give them an answer. Hey, the answer is don't look anywhere else. Start with yourself.
Yeah.
And that teachings came out of a samurai that rode in a Buddhist cave by candlelight back in 1645.
Yeah.
And I was able to extract that teachings of a samurai, teachings of a Ronin, and I became a Ronin.
What was it like to have that self-aware moment where you sit down and you write down all those flaws? What was that like? And was that what brought you out of those dark spaces, really learning, how to make it through those flaws and fix those things about you?
Yeah, I think I took a very special forces approach to my flaws. I looked at the flaws. I looked at the pattern of life on these flaws. I look at when these flaws were triggered. I look at the time, the emotion. I mean, literally, I broke it down into the environment, the temperature, the biometric. I broke it down. Man.
Yeah.
And what I realized, man, it was like I was having a lot of anxiety attacks when I first got out, And it was not because I'm thinking about anything. I wasn't thinking about anything. Nothing. It just would come.
Yeah.
So I started first studying my mind. Right? I started studying my mind, I started talking. I started reading more about how the brain works. 95% of our brain works in the subconscious.
Wow. That's a lot.
That's a lot, right?
Yeah.
So 95% of the time you go through life thinking about your past and you thinking about the future. Well, when you think about your past, Tim, let's think about an event,
Yeah.
right? So if I ask you, hey man, talk about this event, well, there's an emotion tied to that event,
Right.
right?
Mm-hmm.
There's an emotion, there's an experience tied to that event. Do you think that we can produce stress and anxiety by just thinking about things?
Yes.
We absolutely can. So first it starts with the brain, right? It's about understanding all that. Understanding all that. So when I started understanding all that, well, if you understand, then you can combat it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You can fight against it. So I realized, man, that I needed balance in my life. I was this warrior for so long, and through the path of a warrior and through the path of war, I kind of lost certain attributes that I value most as a human being, not a warrior, as a human being. And kindness was it, man.
How much of the advent of Ronin Tactics is, seeing people make it through these scenarios and the different classes you train? Because you train civilians and you train law enforcement, right? And you train, those different groups. How rewarding is that process for you, and how important is that to your mental health?
It's a beautiful thing, man. Like, gosh, giving, it's such a powerful thing, right? But when I say that, it's so when I teach a class, I teach a form of martial art, teach a combat shooting, whatever it is, I'm giving my life experience, right? And each warrior has his flavor on gunfighting, right? But I'm teaching you my experience in life, why things are important to me, and I explain it down to the T. And I remember this, man. Like some students will come to me defeated, just defeated in life,
Right.
So when I say that is some of them are overweight, right? Some of them are facing their depression. I understand this because they tell me. See, and they look for deeper meaning in my training than just gunfighting. They tell me this, But I think what's so rewarding is when I come back. So when I train in San Francisco and I come back a year, gosh, the guy lost weight.
Yeah.
And then I come back again. Man, he lost more weight. He looks great. And and the student comes up to you and start crying and he says, "You show me the way." And I realized that, man, it was the teachings of a Ronin that showed me the way.
Yeah.
Through my darkest moment. Why can't I be the voice and help others through their dark times, So that was rewarding.
Yeah.
So in the teachings of Ronin, man, I teach the mind. I teach you how to live.
Yeah.
It's truly rewarding.
Yeah.
It's truly helped me get over that darkness that I was in.
Yeah. And for those of you out there who don't understand, Ronin Tactics, you take a very multifaceted approach to survivability, right? It's not just guns. It's everything, right? It's a way of life.
Yeah, absolutely. And when people say, "What is your martial art?" I grew up in the 80s, so Bruce Lee was like my role model.
Bruce Lee is still cool.
Yeah, he's so cool.
Yeah. He is.
So Bruce Lee said this, man. He goes, he doesn't believe in forms and styles. He believes in water, right? And water forms to whatever receptacle that it's poured into, A formless style, JKD is what it is. I started studying JKD when I was 11 because of Bruce Lee. If you were to ask me what is your style, I'm truly a formless style because I was trained by the martial arts.
Yeah.
Right? And I draw from certain forms of martial arts and I live by the code of a martial art, Bushido.
Yeah.
Right? The code of a warrior. But my training, man, if you really want to know, it's guerrilla warfare.
Yeah.
Right? It's guerrilla tactics. It's
Right.
unconventional.
Right.
So if you really think about Bruce Lee's teaching, what is more unconventional than a formless style? So when I take his mindset of having a formless style, Tim, I've been trained by 27 countries.
Yeah.
So Malaysian commandos, Iraqi commandos, Libyan commandos, you cross-train with all this. So your technique and strategy is truly formless.
Yeah.
So that's my martial art.
Wow. Adapting yourself to every situation.
To the environment.
Yeah.
How I fight in the jungle is different from how I fight in urban. How I fight in urban is different from how I fight in the Horn of Africa and the Sahara, right? So it's just different. And then hand to hand, same way.
Yeah.
When people say, hey, what is your form? My form martial art is to be able to breach that distance or to be able to create distance to employ a weapon.
Yeah.
I'm not here to tap you out. You know, in fact, you throw me into a cage match, I'll lose, right? Because you took away my weapons.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it's important to have every facet of that, though, right? It is, you know, in a survival setting, you know, it could be, and let's be clear, every situation is a survival setting. It can turn into that really quickly. How have you shaped Ronin into that? Did it start that way? You know, we're going to train every type of tactic. We're going to work on every environment. Where did that mindset come from?
You know, when I first started Ronin, I was trying to find my place.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I was going, well, I know this. I know how to do this. I know how to, you know, literally, I know how to pull people out of the crowd through time, distance, change of direction. I know how to, you know, pick locks. I know how to start cars. I know how to, you know, because I was in that world for so long.
Yeah.
So what do you train on? Right?
Yeah.
So yeah, at first I kind of shotgun everything. I'm like, oh, I do this. And then I realized that what am I passionate about? And then I started dissecting to what does the world really need? You know, I was talking to this 60-year-old man, and he's been injured and he lived a hard life, you know. And he goes, at my age, how can I defend myself? And I said, oh, well, you have to understand your environment, right? You have to pull the intelligence. Intelligence, you're old and broke. You're not going to move as fast as a 20-year-old or a 30-year-old or a 40-year-old, you see?
Right.
So you have to even out that playing field.
Yeah.
He goes, how do you do it? Weapons. You even out with weapons.
Yeah.
And he goes, well, I was thinking about a gun. I'm like, don't be so confined in your thinking.
Yeah.
You know, because in special forces, we had to go in countries without weapons. And we had to produce weapons in country.
Yeah.
So I told him that, so you need to change your mindset until you are a weapon. So that's cool thing about Ronin is that I get to help people find their path, you know, through the teachings of what I'm passionate about.
Yeah.
You know?
How do you impart that knowledge in what you've gone through and the difficulties of transitioning and reintegrating back into society? How have you helped other veterans in that way, or maybe people in general, you know, who are struggling in life? You've talked about the older guys struggling, the younger guys struggling, you know, the younger girls struggling, people that are in these, you know, in everyday life that you see, you know, coming up to you too, you know, I see you've got it all together. You get this wonderful lifestyle. How do I get there? How do you help them with that?
Gosh, man, you have to look at the infrastructure nowadays, right? So when I say that is like, how can I make an impact on this world? And I thought about this, Tim. I say, how can I make the impact in this world? You know, how can I reach people to help them? We have the best social media platforms in today's world, man. The world has gotten smaller because of the information era. As a Green Beret, if I don't take that into effect, like the intelligence of how I'm able to push that data through a social media world. So this is what I do. You know, in the Rangers, in the Green Berets, in the Army, right? You lead by example.
Yeah.
You lead by example, right?
The best leaders do, yes.
Yeah. So that's what I do,
Yeah.
right? When I say that is, you know, I get up every morning at 5.
Yeah.
Every morning. No, there's no days off for me. When I say that is, there's no Saturday schedule or Sunday schedule. Every day is 5 o'clock in the morning. And I tell you why. It's not for work. I get up every morning for me. You know, when the sun is coming up, I'm meditating, you know, and that's how I first connect with God. Right? Because if you don't believe in something higher, right, as a veteran, I'm speaking to veterans, I'm speaking to the people that are trying to find their place. If you don't believe in anything higher than yourself, that's where you be. All right. So first I connect with God. Second, you know, in the morning time, your brain is not at its full function, you know,
Right.
especially at 5 o'clock in the morning.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Mine either.
Right. So
Yeah.
the brain waves are a different frequency in the
Mhm.
morning. See, I'm able to lock in the mornings a lot easier through meditation. And meditation is through the analytical mind, being able to train my analytical mind to be in the present,
Mm.
right? And you do it by, I don't know, one method is you do it through meditation, through monitoring your breath, monitor your breathing. So if you're able to just tune out everything, just monitor that breathing, then you're in the present moment, right?
Right.
Because that's all we have.
Yeah.
That's all that exists,
Mm.
you know, through all the times, through your past, present, future. The only time that matters is the present moment, and that embodies all of time.
And that's so important because we have so many veterans who are stuck in the past, living that past life, right? So living in the present, how do you do that? It's that every morning function, right?
Oh, yeah. So, okay, so when you first join the military, you right, you don't think we get trained. You don't think that we get our minds programmed to whatever mission that we have to do. Exactly, we do, right? And that takes time. It takes time,
Yeah.
right? It takes time to train a soldier to be numb,
Yes.
right? It took me, gosh, man, 22 years before I felt numbness. So it takes time, is what I'm saying. It takes repetition, right? So what I find is this, man. So if you want to find happiness, well, you have to commit time to it. And the only way to be happy is you have to sever that thought of the past.
Mm.
And you have to sever the anxieties of the future. And you have to let go of the ego and don't concern yourself what other people think or say about you. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It matters what you think, man.
Right.
Right? So that's what I tell people. Right? It matters what you think. And it starts in the mornings. Every morning. So if you're not dedicating time for your personal development, well, there you are, my friend. You're not going to ever find it.
Yeah.
You're just kind of letting life lead you.
Mm.
Right?
How important were those teachings for you? You know, where you're reading the Book of Five Rings, and how much of that was your growth into where you're at now?
The Book of Five Rings to me was more of a guideline.
Gotcha.
Right, because Masashi speaks freely of tactics and strategy and all that, and a lot of the book is, if you read it, it's about combat, it's about strategy, but some of it is about his philosophies on things in life, you know. So what Masashi did was first it connected me to the way, which is Bushido, is the Bushido code, is to seek perfection in everything you do. To find beauty in the simplest things, you know, and to live a full life,
Yeah.
right? And to live life in every breath, right? And that's the teachings of that. So I drew that martial art teachings from Masashi, but I also drew a lot of other books, a lot of other things, you know, a lot of other veterans. I read their books. I read other samurai books, other philosophy, Lao Tzu, you know, the founder of Taoism. I started connecting with, you know, to live in harmony with the universe, right? It doesn't matter what religion you are, you know, it's about connecting with God, man, connecting with the universe. And I feel like, you know, in today's society, we are disconnected.
Very disconnected. Yes.
Yeah. And why is that? So, you know, I asked this veteran, I said, what is the first thing you do in the morning, man? He goes, well, I pick up my phone and I check my emails. And then I go to my social medias and I check, you know, my last post, check some comments. See, what you're doing is you woke up when your brain waves are at its least active, and you're injecting other people's thoughts into your brain already from the beginning, day one, started the day, right?
Right.
So you program your mind to never really listen to yourself. You program your mind to be concerned about what everybody else is thinking. So that's why when I get up in the morning, I don't even check anything.
Yeah.
I go straight to meditation, connect with God, be in the present moment, and really I inject positivity into my mind.
Yeah. How do you move around? Because obviously with Ronin, social media is important and showcasing what you're doing. How do you really, subjugate that platform to being just that and not being more? Because I'm sure you've had negative thoughts before. I'm sure there have been some keyboard warriors you've wanted to punch, like I have. Guilty. How do you structure that in a way, your day, where you don't let any of that ruin the rest of your life? Because a lot of guys do get stuck in that, get stuck in that world of social. And it's strange for us because everybody thinks we're these hardened warriors, these cyborgs that return back home, and, oh, we don't pay attention to that stuff. It just rolls right off our back. But
No, Tim.
that stuff hurts.
It doesn't roll off your back, man.
Yeah.
And words do hurt. I'll tell you that. It does hurt. And gosh, people are taking their lives off of words.
Yeah.
Right? And you know what is sad is that, a veteran that badmouths another veteran, I feel, because and I'm not saying that veteran is a bad veteran. He's just going through whatever he's going through.
Right.
And instead of working on himself, he'd rather point the finger, and that's a no-win situation.
Yeah.
No-win situation. See, what I learned in social media was this. Because social media is a learning process for me, and I'll tell you why. Well, gosh, I was on the A teams for so long. It's a secret of life.
Yeah.
And then now you're exposed to, I don't know, for me, million people.
Yeah.
Now you're exposed to that platform. Well, you don't think anxiety comes with that?
A lot. Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So I had to change the way I view the world, how I view things. Okay, if I want my message to be heard, then I have to post it on social media platform.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's a lot of weak people out there that like to target other people. They actually get a high off of going in online and bashing other people because they have an ego and they want to feed it.
Yeah.
But that's the thing is, with the good comes the bad.
Yeah.
Right? And what I find out is this, man, I get hundreds of messages a day from people that needs my voice.
Mm-hmm.
And I, and I'm not talking for the haters. If they want to listen, they listen. I don't hate them.
Yeah.
But I tell you, I'm not talking for them. At first, I'm talking for me, right? Because I'm trying to find my footing in this world again. Right? And I realized through my footing in this world is take my life experience and give it to others. And maybe they can extract the teachings and apply it to their life.
Yeah.
So, okay, case in point, I had this mother who was a single mom, and she was trying to put herself through college, and she was having a difficult time.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote a post about manage your time. Manage your day better.
Yeah,
Defeat the day.
Yeah.
And she wrote me back. She goes, wow, instead of thinking about the big picture about my life, I just tackle each day.
Yeah.
And if I'm able to defeat the day, then I defeat my life.
Mm.
So what I'm saying to you is that, the purpose is to help others.
Yeah.
So it grounds out all the hate to
Yeah.
me, right? Yeah, I get the haters sometimes, they come in, but their words don't really mean anything to me because first, my words mean more to me.
Right.
Through the teachings of Masashi.
Mm.
Right? And then second, my words can help others. And I realize that.
Yeah.
So I don't sweat the small stuff, man.
All that to say, don't sweat the small stuff. That's awesome. It's interesting that you said that. I was just having a discussion with my girlfriend the other day, and she was talking about their, these small gains she was making in fitness, and she was really focused on one part, as women do and men do as well. In the gym, men typically a little bit more on their upper body than they need to be. But we can all be guilty of that sometimes. Gotta get the buys looking good.
Absolutely.
Get ready for the gun show. But she was focused on this, and I was a personal trainer for 6 or 7 years, and I said, kind of something to the effect of what you were saying. It's like, focus, stop worrying about where you're at 3 months from now. Stop that. Take tomorrow. Take today. Check that off. Then the next day, and then before you know it, you hit that 3-month mark and you're noticing all these profound gains that you've made, but it doesn't start, you're not going to have that right now. That ultimate satisfaction comes through the adversity of that environment, right? You're taking it day by day, gym day. Hey, I'm going to get after Monday, and then I'm just worried about Monday. Don't worry about Tuesday, because you worry about Tuesday, it's like, oh my gosh, I've got this much to accomplish.
Yeah.
And before you know it, you've psyched yourself out of the game, right?
Yeah.
Just like going on a mission, I'm sure, right?
Yeah.
You're not going to worry about the next mission.
No,
You're going to work. What happens if you worry about that next mission?
Yeah. You can't worry about the next mission.
Yeah.
You have to be totally locked in and focus on, you know, what's going on at hand.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what's unique about that is what you said was that, you know, I talk about that, you know, defeating the day. One of the podcasts I did with a doctor. But it's also, man, like if you defeat a day, or so let's just say this, you hate working out. Let's just say, oh man, I hate working out, especially
Nobody hates working out.
especially at 5 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
Right? What do you mean you're going to cut all sugars and carbs out of my diet?
Man, no trips to Dairy Queen.
Yeah.
With your uncle.
Yeah, no more trips. So what I'm saying to you is this. So look, those small victories. The small victories as in, I'm going to get out of bed, I'm going to make my bed. I'm going to brush my teeth. I'm going to take a shower, right? I'm going to meditate. I'm going to work out, okay? So those are the daily victories, right? The small little victories, washing your dish, little things that people are like, what?
That's not a victory.
Right, that's not a victory. Those are.
Yeah.
Those are, man. Because it's through the small victories, right? It's through the small victories is that you form a habit, right? Because you do it every day, it becomes a habit,
Yeah.
right? So let's just say you have trained yourself to develop a winning habit.
Yeah.
You're going to win in life no matter what they throw at you. So this is what I'm saying. What my father taught me and what I endured as a Green Beret through, you know, facing my struggles and finding my courage and my voice or whatever, right? All that plays, right, in life.
Yeah.
Right? So if you're able to win those small little victories, man, you win life.
Yeah. That's
win.
amazing.
Yeah.
When you're trying to, you know, when you're developing these habits in throughout your daily life, how much does that come from, you know, how much does that come from being a Green Beret, taking that part of your life in service of your country, and now, you know, waking up at 5 a.m. and doing the little things and treating those as victories? Because a lot of people don't treat those as victories, like you said, right? You're like, it's just washing the dishes. But that's when you don't wash the dishes, right? Because you're just like drudgery, right? It's drudgery to you. Instead, those are victories to you. Where does that come from?
Discipline.
Discipline, yeah.
See, because if you don't have discipline, man, you'll never make it in life. I don't care how talented you are. See, if you don't have the discipline to get up, if you don't have the discipline to take a shower and get dressed, and you don't have the discipline to be kind and show compassion, whatever it is, right? Life is made up of discipline, right?
It's true.
It's so true.
I've gotten that even through the project. I get messages sometimes from guys, you know, photographers. You get to photograph the coolest guys. You get to do, like, oh, man, that's awesome. I want to do that. So, like, can you introduce me to so-and-so? Like, it starts at a base level, dude. I didn't start off, you know, I started off photographing people and growing my art into something to where I could sit down with people like you, but it didn't start off day 1, 2 Lam. You know, we're coming into the dojo and, hey, dude, you want to be part of this project? He's like, what project? I don't even know what you do. You know, it's a development of the art, and I learned as I grew, and learning as I grew, it was developing those disciplines, right, each day. And you're becoming a master of that, but it's knowing also that you can't completely master that, right? Like everything's probably a process for you, correct?
So this is the way I look at it, man. Is that, you know, when I meditate, right? Think about the form of meditation, right? What is the purpose of meditation? Is to be in the present moment, to be completely engaged and be focused on to whatever you're doing in the present moment, right? And this draws from the teachings of the martial arts, and this comes from the teachings of samurai. So when I make my bed, I'm totally engaged, man. I'm totally focused on that procedure, right?
You're not worried about Instagram when you're making
Oh
your bed?
yeah. I wonder if I should take this picture. No. So the thing is, I'm totally engaged in that.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying to you is, if I was to teach you to be totally engaged in, I don't know, business,
Yeah.
right? Well, how does that start? To be totally engaged in making your bed, to be totally engaged in the present moment, to be totally engaged with injecting positively, to connecting with God, whatever it is, to be totally engaged with keeping on your personal schedule. Right? So my personal schedule is 5 o'clock in the morning, meditation, physical training, cardiovascular training, and then into my workday.
Yeah.
Right? So I have to keep a schedule. It's no different.
Yeah.
Right? You just got to keep a schedule. So that's the first thing. And you can't do that unless you have what? Dedication.
Dedication. Yeah.
Can't do it.
How have you found that dedication in your life now?
You know, man, my first year out of the Army was really hard. And when I say that is, you know, physical fitness has always been a passion, right? A lifestyle. You know, when I got out, I was hit with depression, you know. And the hardest thing for me to do was, gosh, just even go to the gym. Like something so basic that I found pleasure in. I was in a dark place, right?
Yeah.
And I'll tell you the story, man. It takes, 15 minutes, for me to get in my car and drive to the gym that I had a membership in. 15 minutes. And I knew that.
Yeah.
So regardless of how I felt that day, regardless if I wanted to quit on life, regardless if I was in a dark place, I was going to get in my car and I was going to drive 15 minutes to that gym.
Yeah.
And I was going to get out of the car. I was going to sit in there. Now, it was up to me if I wanted to work out or not. But that was the 15 minutes. And I did that for a year. A year.
Yeah.
Until it became a habit.
Yeah.
Right? Until it became a habit. And I
Yeah.
actually looked forward to it. And then I found my pace again. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Right? So dedication, doing the same stuff over and over, even if you don't like it, that's dedication.
Yeah.
You know it's good for you. You know that if you eat this meal, it's going to be healthy for you in the long run.
Mm-hmm.
But yet we choose the easy answer.
Yeah.
We choose the quick answer, right?
Right.
But man, if I tell you, hey, if you have dedication, it will reflect throughout your whole life,
Yeah.
right? So the small battles, the washing the dishes, the making the bed, all those are little battles that adds up to the overall win in life.
Yeah. The answer often comes through that adversity and through that dedication. You know, you didn't start out by saying, I'm going to do this for a year and then I'll be ready.
Yeah.
You know, if you got ahead of yourself during your training, going through the Q course, you'd have never made it, right? Like you gotten ahead of yourself, like, with the whiteboard, just going every day and wondering what's next. That destroys a lot of guys, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's truly in special forces training. It's all psychological. It's always a mind game.
Yeah.
And enduring physical pain.
Yeah.
On top of that, but it's mostly mind.
What do you think guys have trouble translating that into their modern lives when you go from such a difficult lifestyle? There are those Green Berets, Navy SEALs, recon guys that suffer when they get out. What do you think it is that causes? I know everybody is different, but what do you think a big overall cause of that is in struggling? Is it living in the past?
Well, I tell you, I do go out to these veterans groups. I go to Warrior to Warrior, and I speak to veterans that have a hard time. And majority of the veterans I speak to are special operations guys. Mm-hmm. So I do have a snapshot on the issues.
Yeah.
First, they can't let go. They're always chasing that adrenaline, that high. There is a high,
Oh, I'm sure.
There's a high. There's adrenaline.
Yes.
That's what we live for. That's why we free fall and do what we do because, we live. There's a certain breed of men that like that lifestyle, right? So let's just say So you're going that lifestyle for so long. Well, Tim, that's your normal, right?
Yeah.
So that's your normal now.
Mm-hmm.
Like life is boring if it's like an average, like if it's an exciting life for a normal civilian, that's a boring life for ex-commando,
Yeah.
right?
That's the way we want our commandos.
Right?
Yeah. We want that
Yes.
to be boring to them. Yeah.
Yeah, but this is the thing is if you're trying to find your peace, man, it kind of contradicts everything. So that's why you have to change first your views, right? You're not a commando anymore, unless you're doing that on a contract or you're doing that with the agency.
Right.
Hey, totally get it. But the thing is, it's going to come to an end. Either now or later, it's going to come to an end. So
Everything
you're
does.
going to meet that. You're going to meet that resistance either now or you're going to meet it later. So how can you pass that resistance? You can only pass the resistance going back to Masashi Miyamoto's teachings. Everything comes from within.
Yeah.
So you have to change the way you view the world. And then you have to kind of find beauty in the world again and not just through adrenaline,
Right.
right? And I find beauty through connecting with God in the morning. I find beauty in meditating in my Zen garden.
Yeah.
Right.
You took me out there. It's beautiful.
Thank you. So your life has to change if that's what you want to find peace, right? Because if you're running and gunning your whole life, yeah, you're just full of fire your whole life, man. You'll never be full. And I wasn't full when I got out. I had this strength, but I had a lot of weakness because I lost it during the focus on the strength through the warriors, you know?
You see that too. I mean, I've been in groups, with guys who just gotten out, and they served 20 years. And I got a good friend of mine who was command sergeant major in the 82nd Airborne. He did 24 years, and, multiple combat tours, to the Arghandab and some pretty rough places. And and he would be fine with me saying this is like now that he's done those 24 years, he's very much on the search of self. And he's living it, and he has found a lot of peace and healing through the nonprofits that he's working with. But he also found out that as he connected with that nonprofit world, he hadn't been focused on himself enough, and so he was working but still suffering because he had not returned to self and found those inner disciplines yet, that he needed outside of the military.
I talk about like you could be a man of wealth, but you can be spiritually bankrupt.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So, man, the war takes a lot out of you, man, and you're going to face things that a human being has to make a decision. And it's hard decisions, in war. And some of us carry that weight, and you shouldn't. You shouldn't have to carry that weight. You should be able to have the ability through the teachings of a Ronin or whatever, right? Whatever your path for healing is, have the ability to have a practice, the ability to have a course of action or how you're going to eliminate, that thing holding you back. Yeah. Right. And, me being a Green Beret, I was able to take the mission planning process, right, and how I found my enemies and execute my missions, and I was able to apply it to life.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow. I've been watching this. I just finished watching this documentary on Michael Jordan. And
Yes.
love it. So good.
Yes.
Just a guy at the top of his game
Yes.
who experienced every day as a competition.
Yes.
Just very powerfully done and shows his life. Very, very just so impactfully. Right. How and I'm getting to a point here. Jordan would probably make a terrible coach. How do you, as a trainer, instructor, you're known for being an incredible instructor. Ronin Tactics, I have buddies who are like, hey, man, when you could talk to two, tell him to let me into one of his gun classes. They're impossible to get into, You got such a waiting list. You've got
Well, they sell in hours,
hours. That's awesome. I mean, that's a wonderful, blessed place to be, right?
Very blessed.
How did you take being at the top of your game doing this, and how do you translate that to teaching? Because it's hard sometimes, right? When a guy won't get it, I think that's something Jordan would suffer, and is like, I don't know, just shoot it. Like, you know, like this is how I make my shot. And then as he's translating it into coaching someone, it's tough, right? Because you did it at such a high level. How do you take that high level and then break it down into maybe baby food for somebody who's just learning, you know, just starting out?
Well, you know, in the special forces, we have to, one of our missions is force multiply. You know, we have to go into conflict areas. We have to train rebels, militia groups, right? We have to train people with third grade educations.
Wow.
I had to train people that don't even speak my language. And when I say train them, we have to train them to overthrow either a existing government, or we have to train them to suppress a rebel force that's, you know, maybe taking over that government.
Yeah.
Whatever the interests of the United States are at that time, you know. So, you know, I had 23 years roughly of that, training rebels in third world countries. And, you know, when I say the level of training that the Green Berets go under is not just combat. You know, we train cultural awareness. We train the infrastructure, the demographics. We understand the people, the religion, you know. So when we go into a country, I understand you. I understand that you're a rebel that's been fighting for your country, right? And you just finished a civil war. So where's your family? And so what I'm saying to you is, when I train people, I understand the depth of my training, because they're not protecting only them. They're fighting for their family. They're fighting for whatever tribe. They're fighting for whatever country, whatever resistance. See?
Yeah.
So the only way to do that is you got to put yourself in the people.
Yeah.
So when I became Ronin, I started hearing the people, man. You know, I met a lady, and there was a guy who broke in her house and really assaulted her, extremely, almost left her there to die.
Wow.
You know, beat her to the point where she almost died. And, you know, she slept in the closet for 8 years.
Wow.
8 years.
8 years. Jeez.
Yeah. You know, and I met her. And she just came out literally, and she was trying to learn Krav Maga, you know, the way of defending herself. And I had a chance to sit down and talk to her. But, you know, to hear her pain, right, to hear that.
Yeah.
And, you know, I heard it, you know, through my whole life, you know, when I say that is, gosh, man, we had to free slaves, you know, in Africa. We had to fight against genocide,
Yeah.
you know, in some of the locations I was in. So I know like the struggles, but to hear it from our own Americans, you know,
Yeah.
and then to see the law enforcement, well, it goes back to purpose again. Right.
Wow. Yeah. That's powerful.
Yeah.
With all these talks and discussions that are going on in such a, you know, tumultuous time nowadays, you know, you got people clamoring for defund the police and all those kinds of things. How much does, you know, we've heard this subject often brought up, and, you know, I have my own beliefs and viewpoints of this. What do you think of these discussions that are going on, you know, defunding the police, taking more money away from training and bringing them into other areas? What is that? What is that? Where does that put you mindset wise?
Well, I mean, I think that let's just take a snapshot of, you know, recent events, right? With the looting, the rioting, the protesting that got out of hand, right?
Right.
So think about like with these riotings that are happening in these cities. Well, some cities are okay with just letting it happen.
Right.
I mean, we see it, right? Okay. So this is being played out, and this is multiple cities across America. All right. So then now we want to disarm our law enforcement, like literally take away their rifles, right? And then we don't want them to have extra training, and then you want to handicap them. Well, what do you think that's going to do?
Yeah.
Well, so when you basically say, "Hey, total anarchy in our city," okay, just do what you need to do, burn it down. Well, we have law-abiding citizens that have businesses in these locations.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And they have a right to defend themselves. Right? So when you disarm our law enforcement who cannot even react to that situation, who's going to defend the small businesses? Who's going to defend the families?
Comes down to those individuals.
Comes down to individuals, right? So it's more important now than ever,
Yeah.
right? It's more important now than ever.
Yeah.
So I've been in countries where there are lawless lands, right? And I could tell you what happens.
Yeah.
It's barbaric.
Wow. Yeah. What about, what about being in those places has increased your respect for what we have here? Because you did it for 23 years. You've been in some places where the only law was there is no law, and people suffer. People are walking miles and miles just to get their water. Sleeping under the stars every night with threat coming from animals, things that we don't think about even in America.
I mean, just like, I don't know, coming back home from Iraq, just sleeping in your house and not being mortared, or getting shot at just driving down the street, in the special forces, working in some of the countries, you're going to some of these checkpoints. You don't know if they're terrorist checkpoints or you don't know if they're the government checkpoints. You don't know if it's their intelligence network that's going to kidnap you. You don't know.
Yeah.
And we didn't have the numbers it's not a war zone, but I would say Libya is a war zone, right?
Yeah.
Right?
It's officially not a war zone, but it really is.
So in these lawless lands, it's barbaric. Mm-hmm. And if we continue to do this to our law enforcement, then it's going to be barbaric. It is. Right. Absolutely. And it's going to be, people trying to defend themselves. And then people are not trained. Yeah. Some people are not trained to defend themselves.
What has it been like for you as the years have gone by? You've seen less and less training, or what do you, in this breakdown of training and tactics, what do you see as a trainer on the ground, with these classes coming in? I'm sure you see some very well-trained people, but you also see a lot of people who just don't even have a base knowledge of it.
Yeah, and that's why they're coming to me. And that's the approach I take,
Which means everything, right? Just to even know that you need it, right? That's very self-aware.
Yeah, okay, so a journey of 1,000 miles, right? Began with a single step. Allows you. Confucius philosophy, dating back to 600 BC, but that first step is so critical. Because in life, a lot of people don't take that first step.
Yeah.
They don't take the first step. Because I'm telling you, man, if you take that first step, well, you're going to have to take a second and third, right? And before you know it, it becomes a rhythm.
Positive momentum.
Right? Yeah. It becomes a rhythm of life. So when people come to me, some are untrained, right? Absolutely. The law enforcement, they're better trained. It depends on the student. It depends on the class I'm training on. More of the advanced classes, I have requirements.
Yeah.
Right? Like the vehicle tactics where they're shooting inside vehicles, close quarters combat, you're shooting 1 meter off each other's barrels, Wow. So it gets really close quarters and their weapons manipulation. So you have your different type of people. People are diehard, right? You have your military people and you have your military wannabe people, right? Yeah. And then you have your law-abiding citizens just want to learn, So with my curriculums, I break it down. Right. When I say I break it down is, when I trained, let's say I go to combat. Well, first is country X, and then I pull country X and I look at the intelligence and everything, right? I look at the, the width of the streets. I look at the vehicles. I look at the measurement of the people. I look at the window. I study all this before I even get in country, So that's what I tell people is like, okay, so if you're trying to defend your home, then go into your hallway and take a measurement of that hall. Go into a room and take a measurement of that room. Then you go out to a flat range and you're simulating those measurements, right?
Right.
On the flat range.
Yeah.
Right. And then I put cones out and I'm simulating their world in gunfighting. So I really tailor it towards what they're going to use it for. A lot of instructors don't do that.
Yeah.
Where they, maybe the class is just weapon safety. Right. Or basic weapons, firearms or whatever. I go more into the environment. I go more into the tactics and the strategy side of it than just weapons manipulations.
How important is it to develop that instinctual model where guys, because I remember with my guys on my team, when we were going over to Iraq, it's like, Colzack's going to ask us to do magazine drills again, and we're just, slap and repeat, pulling mags, getting used to that feeling, right? It's the same thing in the house, right? You got to get used to your greatest advantage is your home. Right? I bet if someone comes into Tu Lam's home, please don't do that. That would be a mistake. You're going to die in a terrible way. But if someone comes into your home, you know every corner, don't you?
I do.
You know every layout.
And I know where the natural lightings go through the windows. I know where the artificial lighting's in. I know what the reflections are into the next rooms. I know the dead spaces. I know the dark areas. I know the dominations points in a room. So I already figure all this out. But I've been doing it for so long. So literally I could walk through a house and go, oh, point of dominance. All right, if I stand here, or roughly about 15 yards on this hallway. See, I already know all that. But
most people don't think that when they're coming in. Where's my greatest point of dominance? My friends think I'm weird.
Yeah. Why are you going over there? Oh, I'm trying to control the room.
Exactly.
No, but that's a survival mindset.
Yeah.
Right? That's a survival mindset.
Yeah. And it's not being paranoid.
It's not being
Tell people
paranoid.
that. That's important for people to hear from you, because I tell my friends that all the time. And I have friends, we go to a restaurant and they don't sit. They let me sit with my face towards the exit. They know that I don't want to sit, on the other side of the booth. So they know and they're used to me. But, my point is like, I'm not paranoid. It's just had the knowledge in this world that we live in, anything can turn into a frenetic, into a combat zone, So how do you explain that as not being paranoid?
I always give this story that kind of breaks the tone of things, I said, so let me tell you about how I went to a grocery store in Yemen, in the city of Sana'a, right? Going to a grocery store, something easy. So first I had to, through time distance, to change the direction. I had to pull out the surveillance that's behind me, whoever's behind me, if there is anybody behind me. So I had to go through that corridor, right? And then I have to move to certain conflict areas. So when we say conflict areas, there's militia-ran territories. So you might have to transit through heavily armed militia group to go into a supermarket area where you park your car, where a majority of the people have never seen an Asian guy.
Yeah.
Right? A 210-pound Asian guy tattooed out walk into a grocery store in Yemen where they don't like you because you're a Westerner. Right. So your survival skills have to be on point. Your situational awareness cannot fail, right? Because your life depends on it. So it's not being paranoid. It's just some of these skills that I've developed throughout my years. Yeah. Right? I can walk through a room and call points in the room. I can call, what the book looks like just by one quick walk through the room without even looking at it.
And there's no feeling of anxiety attached to that.
No, because at this point in my life, it's about me giving my knowledge and what kept me alive. Right? So when I walk through a house and I say, okay, that hallway was roughly about 5 meters in width, it was 15 yards in length, right? Well, that's my fighting ground. I could possibly fight on that. So I better know what those dimensions are roughly, right? Yeah. But those are skills I developed because that was my environment. Right?
For 23 years.
Right, that was my environment. But hey, man, what if I say, hey, that wasn't my environment, but how can you take that teaching and put it in your world? Right?
Right.
So that's what I mean. It's like, yeah, I could teach you kind of like the extreme situation, like, I don't know, being in a country hunting bad guys, right, in a foreign country, right, with a bunch of other bad guys trying to kill you. But the thing is, you don't need to learn all that. I can give you that story and you can extract what is useful, the teachings of Bruce Lee.
What do you think is one of the most impactful parts of teaching mentality, and teaching capability within mentality to some of these classes? You have to come in with a humble mindset to your class, right? Like humility is everything in a lot of ways, and not thinking you know it all, because you're going to break down a lot of those, probably bad habits that guys have, or they think they might know it all. How important is it to have a strong mentality coming into the class, and how do you teach that?
As a Ronin, you have to deliver an energy right away within the first 30 seconds.
I've seen that energy.
I mean, it's
I'm like,
when
let me stay out of the way.
What's so funny is, I'm a really nice guy, right?
Yes, very.
Okay,
Yeah.
and I'm very polite, and I
But during the
really,
class, I wouldn't get in the way.
but what's so funny is when I teach, right? And before the class, I introduce myself to all the students. I say, thank you for coming out. A lot of people drive in for all the different states. Have people fly in from other countries
Wow.
before. So I introduce myself, and I'm like, oh, thank you, for coming out. And then when they bow in, it's Ronin. You're going to get a different demeanor.
I've seen it happen. Yeah.
So when I say that the first 30 seconds, they're going to feel my energy.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not yelling, I'm not screaming. I'm very soft tone.
Yeah.
In the way I teach and talk,
But there's a presence about you.
they're going to feel the energy.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
And even in close quarters combat,
Mm-hmm.
I could teach you all day, but you're going to feel that speed. You're going to feel that power.
Yeah.
So, and I feel that's a unique thing for me and how I teach is I really bring in the martial arts side to even gunfighting, even my movement, how I throw a punch is how I drive a gun.
Yeah.
And I truly teach that in my classes, and it's been really popular.
Yeah.
For us.
You probably had some very impactful moments. Can you talk about, are there any ones that you remember where you're like, wow, that was incredible, where you took somebody from a base level to, a higher level and you see them and their confidence develop, but just, any type of scenarios you can think of where it was really impactful in your life and for you?
One thing that kind of stood out when you were asking me, we were asked to go to the Navajo Nation reservation.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. The Navajo Nation PD asked us to come in. They're SWAT guys and plus their PD. Now, I want to put you in this terrain, right? So think about that. You're in a reservation, a lot of high crime there. In fact, they practice a lot of witchcraft, believe it or not.
Wow.
In the reservation. The skinwalkers kind of did, and it ties back into their heritage. But why I went in here was because we get asked to go a lot of places. I'm at the point in my business where I can pick and choose wherever I feel is important.
It's a wonderful place to be.
Yeah. And the Navajo Nation, first is rooted in history. The Navajo Nation PD, I started doing my research. Man, they only had 16 officers.
Wow.
16. This terrain that they had to protect, it was huge. They were armed with Glocks, a couple of rifles. When I flew in, there was a few Walmarts and stuff like that. And at that time, Walmart was still selling their hunting rifles. And as I was teaching all these officers, I asked them, I said, so what's to stop me from getting on a ridge line up in these mountains, just picking you guys off because you only have Glocks?
Uh-oh.
What came out of it was they were awakened.
Yeah.
Nobody ever told them this.
Right.
Obviously, it's common sense, right? But man, sometimes unless you kind of been through it, you don't think like that.
Yeah.
And then I talk about the terrain. A few days out on the range, we were teaching them, and then we went into the school. I was fighting back against school shootings. So we went in to teach their specialty teams on how to react, contain, isolate, and act the shooter in a school scenario. But what I found on this trip, man, it was first history.
Yeah.
You see it. Like, this is where the settlers went, when we pushed out west, and the natives and that history. And I just felt connected there.
Yeah.
It was really cool.
That's awesome.
I mean, but there's so many.
Yeah.
There's so many of these stories, with connecting with people.
Is there any one aspect that you enjoy of this, and what you do more than the other? Do you enjoy teaching law enforcement most or civilian, or they're just different? What do you enjoy the most within this world?
I enjoy both, man. I enjoy teaching the civilians. I enjoy teaching the law enforcement. I enjoy teaching the military. The thing about the law enforcement and military, they have more of a specialized requirement. They have more of, how did you do this? Whereas for civilians, is like, just show me weapons, safety, show me marksmanship training, whatever. And obviously I have civilians that are pretty badass civilians, that dedicate a lot of time to that art. I teach blade tactics. I teach empty hand-to-hand combat. I teach combat pistol, combat rifle. I teach, vehicle tactics, CQB. I teach a lot. What I find is that when it comes to the hand-to-hand, that's a unique crowd. They're looking for a unique skill. And then the people are able to go into the pistol. They're looking for, I'm talking about civilians, they're looking more at home defense stuff. But what I opened their eyes to is this, the gun classes and the knife classes. You and I are sitting roughly about 3 yards from each other.
Yeah.
So if you have a gun on your hip line, you think you could stop me from getting to you?
I don't think I could stop you, period. But but just human to human, no, probably not.
But what I'm saying is that you have to have time to employ that.
Right.
Right. You have to have space. And if I take your space, I take your time. So I teach them how to create time.
Yeah.
Through hand-to-hand combat. I teach them how to create space to employ weapons. I teach range and tactics. So everything stems off the empty hands because that's what you got.
Yeah.
Right before the weapon. And then everything extends from the empty hands. Sticks, knives, rocks, guns, blades, swords, whatever.
So those are basically an extension of you as a weapon.
How I throw a punch is exactly how I present my weapon.
Yeah.
Same motion. My footworks are the same in close quarters. But not a lot of people are trained in the martial arts.
Right.
So their body doesn't move like that, right? So I teach it. I break it down into you are the weapon and, extension of your body.
What do you think are the greatest dangers facing our society nowadays, and kind of what have you had to employ? Have your classes changed over the last couple of years, from what I've seen and, 3-4 years ago? I don't know. Time goes so fast. I can't even monitor it. But have you had to change kind of the direction or any of the things within your classes to fit what's going on in society now?
Yeah, I like the active shooter scenarios.
Right, yeah.
The tactics has to change because some of these active shooters are employing basic military tactics on law enforcement. And some of these law enforcement guys, they're not military. They never see the play. So you never know the play, the tactic, then you're not going to win. That's what we're facing these days is combating against active shooters with tactics.
Yeah.
So how do you do that with a crowd? We do a lot of that. We do a lot of, for civilians, we do a lot of, if somebody breaks into your home, we put them in a simulated house, turn off all the lights, their guns in a different room. How are you going to get to it? Some of the drills that we did was we had a simulated, it's a house, it's actually, but with a catwalk, like a shoot house. And it was inside a hangar. We cut off all the lights. And I had 3 combatants in that house. There was a lady that was in her bedroom. So the moment she heard something, I kicked the wall. The moment she heard it, she had to get up and she had to move with 3 combatants in the house.
Wow.
And they don't know where she's at. She don't know where they're at.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So it adds a little bit of realism to it.
Yeah,
right?
a little adrenaline.
Right? Because stealth has a lot to do with it. People don't think about that. Speed has a lot to do with it. Understanding terrain has a lot to do with it. Knowing dead spaces, natural lighting, all of that. People don't think about that. They think, I need to get to my gun and do this. Well, there's a lot of other circumstances. If we thought like that in the military, we would have lost every battle, right?
Yeah.
Because we're not maximizing terrain. We're not maximizing angles. We're not maximizing distance. Yeah. So that's what I bring into.
You see that even with the tactics of going country to country, from Afghanistan to Iraq. I remember guys are having to, I remember I had buddies who deployed to Iraq, and then they said, they came back from Afghanistan after. I said, man, it's a whole different animal out there. You're learning, and a lot of the tactics the military are teaching were not even effective for these main grunt units. They're going from Iraq, getting very little time back home, and then going to Afghanistan where, the range is so different, and you're facing an enemy you can't see very often. Yeah. And it's extremely challenging.
Yeah. Even the terrain, like, the walls in Iraq are different from the mud hut walls in Afghanistan, right?
Yeah.
It's been aged for thousands of years. The fighting's different because the weapons are different. We had a lot of Soviet weapons in Afghanistan. Absolutely. Terrain, the enemy, all that. Yeah. All that. Yeah. All that changes. I usually ask people, I ask you this. So you have a concealed permit. So think about your daily life. What is the most vulnerable time in your daily life?
Probably when I'm out and about.
Okay. Yeah. So walking to your car or something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? Walking to the store.
Right.
So that's your environment. Yeah. So when I talk about that to people, I'm like, okay, so if you're here for a pistol defense course, what's your most dangerous time in your day? When are you going to be carrying that pistol? I have to go to my car because I have to close down the store at midnight to go to the car to drive home, right? Well, that's the most dangerous time. Mm-hmm. So what's the distance? What's the terrain like? Is the door swing open or closed? Is it glass doors? Does it have screening in the front of the... So that's your environment now. So you study that environment and you simulate that most dangerous course of action.
Wow. A lot of people don't think about that.
That's my approach to training. That's how I took the special forces side of it and put it into the teachings of a Ronin.
What is your peace nowadays? Where do you find that peace nowadays in your daily life? Is it that same thing, that structure? You know, waking up every morning at 5 and getting after it. Where do you find your peace most nowadays? Because we talked about how important the present is, and we are in the present.
Yeah.
So what is your most, what brings you peace?
Oh gosh, well I walked you around my Zen garden.
Oh yeah, man, that made me feel peaceful.
Yeah. So first I work on my Japanese Zen garden, right? That brings me peace, total focus and dedication to that moment. I was having a conversation with a good friend of mine the other day, and he said, I find peace. He's an older gentleman. He goes, I find peace being in the river fly fishing. I said, talk about it, man.
Yeah.
He goes, man, the smell in the morning of nature. It's kind of cold in the water. You can hear the birds, the insects. I mean, he really broke it down. I said, well,